This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome to the 10th Annual EPIC Conference. My name is Ashley O'Neill, and this year I have the honor of serving as president of the Emory Public Interest Committee, or EPIC for short, as we like to call it here. And before I begin, I'd like to thank Catherine Davis and Jay Billsborough, the conference co-chairs this year, and their entire team for so diligently putting together what I'm sure will be an amazing day. EPIC is a student-run organization whose mission is to promote awareness and increase understanding of public interest law, to encourage and facilitate the employment of Emory law students in public interest legal positions, and to acknowledge the professional responsibility of lawyers and law students to make legal services more accessible to those who do not have adequate representation. As an organization, EPIC strives to provide students with opportunities to engage in public interest and to interact with public interest practitioners. Throughout the year, EPIC hosts panels, service projects, and 2 capstone events: the Inspiration Awards, which honor 3 practitioners each year in the area of public interest, and the conference, for which you are here today. As a 3L, and I kind of can't believe that I'm actually a 3L, I've had the pleasure of attending 2 previous conferences, and I'm happy that this year's conference touches on a theme that seems to have run through the 2 prior years, giving a voice to those who are easily overlooked. My 1L year, the conference was child law past, present, and future, bringing together pediatricians, educators, attorneys, legislators, and professors to discuss children's rights and vulnerabilities in the courts and under the law. My 2nd year, the conference was And Justice for All, Criminal Justice in the South, which explored the core stages of the criminal justice system and the flaws within the process with room for possible reforms. And having had the opportunity to attend 2 excellent conferences, this year I was nervous to figure out what we'd be doing and how we could live up to the prior years. And yet here I am today at a conference that touches on the same theme on some of the most overlooked victims, those of modern slavery. So I'm excited to welcome you here today to EPIC's 2013 conference, Neighbors for Sale, Modern Slavery in America. And now I'm going to welcome Dean Robert Atty.
So we have a great program ahead for us today, and so I only want to just take a couple of minutes to welcome all of you here on behalf of the faculty of the law school and really the entire law school community. The EPIC conference is really one of the highlights of the year at the law school each year. We are ultimately as a profession, as a legal profession, we are a public interest profession. No matter what line of work you are in, no matter what area of work you pursue, no matter what subject matter you specialize in, this is really a profession of the public interest. It's committed to the public interest. And so we really think of this gathering as Emory Law School's most visible expression of that recognition of the nature of our profession and its commitment to public interest. We're grateful as such to all the work that our conference co-chairs each year put into it, that the entire EPIC board and really the entire EPIC membership puts into the conference. None of this would happen without their hard work, so please join me in giving them a hand for all the work that they've done. This year's theme in particular is an especially, meaningful one to the law school, I would say, and I want to say to me in particular as well. For the law school, it's a little more than 20 years ago that Emory begins the Child Advocacy Project in 1992 that is committed to, in essence, the same questions about the treatment of our children, the abuse of our children here in the state of Georgia, and really nationally and internationally. That project in 2000 blossoms into the Barton Clinic, which then 10 years later becomes the Barton Center, that is really doing sort of cutting-edge work on these issues and other related issues related to children and our most vulnerable populations, in a sense. And so, so thematically, this is it's a great fit in some sense with the interests of the law school. That EPIC chose this theme in some sense is representative of the work that Barton does in this area, but also all the work that the EPIC membership, the students who participate in EPIC do, sometimes in conjunction with Barton, but sometimes otherwise as well. So it's a great source of pride, I would say, for me as an individual faculty member, and for all of us, that Emory Law students played a central role in putting this issue, along with the Attorney General, of putting this issue really in front of the state and making it a centerpiece consideration for us to be focused on. For me in particular, and here there's a Georgia connection, I had the honor for several years of serving as chair of the board of an organization called the Tahirih Justice Center. It's a DC-based nonprofit that does a lot of work related to human trafficking of women and girls. And in its origins, it really started in Georgia in that the founder of the organization is a native Georgian, went to Agnes Scott, and then when a student, while still a law student at American University in DC, started that project. So this is a subject that is really close to the entire law school and its mission, and very much close to me. And so again, we're so pleased you're here, and I welcome you. I want to invite up Jay, one of the conference co-chairs, who will lead us forward.
Well, good to see all of you here today. My name is Jay Billsborough, and I'm one of the co-chairs of this year's EPIC conference. First, I would like to mention a few logistical details for the benefit of our guests here at Emory Law School today. First, note the location of bathrooms. On this floor, bathrooms are out these back doors along this wall of the auditorium. And on the first floor, bathrooms are on the wall opposite the classrooms in which our panels will convene. Also on the first floor, as I said, are the classrooms in which the first and second panels will be held. The final panel will be right back here in this room. As was breakfast, lunch will be served in Hunter Atrium, right outside these auditorium doors. There is overflow seating available on the first floor. At the close of the day, we will have an action reception, and that will take place, again, right here in Hunter Atrium, right outside these auditorium doors. Now, for the benefit of our panelists here today, we have set aside room 1A on the first floor as a green room of sorts, where you can step aside and take a breather if you need to. Now, last spring, Catherine Davis pulled me aside before class one morning, and she asked me, would you be willing to co-chair this year's EPIC conference with me? I would like to make the focus human trafficking. And I said, well, Catherine, I know human trafficking is bad, and I'm glad to get on board with you on this, but I'm not sure I will be able to help you much with the substance of the conference. Now, I would see you as the visionary of sorts in this endeavor, and myself as the role of the faithful ox. If you bring the speakers, I'll do my best to bring people and money and food and pull all the logistics together. And she said with that lovely southern accent of hers, all right. Well, the truth is that we have pulled together what I hope will be a great event today, really in spite of my own best efforts. And I want to take a moment to thank a few of the heroes who came together to make this day what it is. A thank you to the phenomenal staff here at Emory Law School for the time and resources they contributed to this event. A thank you to those such as Sue McAvoy and others in career services for their help, and Joshua Thomas and others in marketing who helped promote today's event. Thank you to Eric Blackwell and Deb Floyd who assisted with ordering food for all of us. Thank you to Amish Modi and his staff in operations for assisting with facility support, and a thank you to Corky Gallo and Scotty for providing our technology needs here today. And a thank you to so many others who helped along the way. A thank you to Amy Young for designing our poster, and a thank you to Laws for sharing their table linens with us today. A thank you to Anam Ismail and Steve Justice, last year's conference co-chairs, for their wealth of experience and their willingness to share their insights with us every step along the way. A thank you to all our volunteers today for helping put on this event. I would like to thank our conference leadership team, Mike Evans for helping with fundraising, Kirsten Sale for helping with marketing, Austin Bernstein who worked with the caterers to make sure that we would all have food to eat here today, and my sidekick Rachel Berman, who is helping me keep my head screwed on straight today, managing all of the logistics and planning and executing this conference. And of course, I want to extend a big thank you to our sponsors, without whose support this event simply would not be possible. A thank you to the Emory Law Student Bar Association, the Graduate Student Government Association, Graduate Student Council, the Barton Child Law and Policy Center, the Emory University Office of the Provost, and a huge thank you to Emory Law School itself and its commitment to the public interest in providing significant support, both financially and in time, energy, and resources. Please join me in thanking all of our volunteers and sponsors. And finally, I want to thank my friend and colleague, Catherine Davis, for all of her work in making today possible. Catherine has worked tirelessly, coordinating with Sam Olens' office and our many panelists and speakers here today to make today's dialogue one of the best you'll find on this subject of modern slavery. Her passion and commitment to this human rights issue of our time is truly an inspiration. And the quality of our programming today is a testament to the innumerable hours that she has poured into making today possible. Catherine, it has been my pleasure to work with you in this endeavor. And at this time, I present to you this auditorium, and ladies and gentlemen, Catherine Davis.
Thank you, Jay. When it comes to faithful oxes, there are none quite like Jay Billsborough. Good morning, my name is Catherine Davis, and I'm a 2L here at Emory. Again, I can't say enough how diligently Jay has worked through every logistical detail, things I've asked and things I never would have thought to ask for. He is the hardest worker I've ever known. I echo all of Jay's thanks, and most importantly, I thank you for coming today. Whether you're a trafficking expert or you're coming for the first time to learn about a new topic, each of you gave up a football game day, or maybe Music Midtown tickets, or an otherwise nice fall afternoon. We have students here today from Georgia State, from John Marshall, from Chapel Hill, from Alabama, from UGA, and from Emory. And we are thankful for your participation and your commitment to learning more about this issue. I trust that your day will not be spent in vain. A little bit about how we got here. When I graduated from college, I moved to Calcutta, India to work with investigators and attorneys who handled child sex trafficking cases. While I was living in Calcutta, I was accepted to Emory Law School. Within a week of my admission, a team of people from Atlanta came to Calcutta to volunteer with our office. While they were in Calcutta, they spoke with me extensively about the nature of human trafficking in Atlanta. That Atlanta was one of the biggest hubs of child sex trafficking in particular in the nation. I realized that the issue I'd moved to the other side of the world to address was just as prevalent here in my home country. Modern slavery, in the form of human trafficking, was right in my own backyard. So a good part of the reason I chose Emory Law was to come back to a place where human trafficking was an issue and where there was an august body of leaders committed to doing something about it, an august body whom I might could join one day. Today, we are so grateful to the Emory administration for allowing us this forum to discuss this issue, and to so many from that august body of leaders who've joined us. You know, in law school, we spend a lot of time talking about construction of terms. How do we construe a word or an idea? What is the breadth of its meaning? Today, as you go throughout the conference, I'd like for you to consider your construction of the idea of your neighbor. Who is your neighbor? Just the guy next door? Or perhaps do you have a greater, sweeter understanding and perhaps a sense of obligation or loyalty to your entire community? 50 years ago, one of the finest leaders of this city said, "I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will sit down together at the table of brotherhood." Today, every son and daughter of Georgia has a chance to come together and stand against modern slavery as it exists in our time. Hear me well, particularly if this is your first time learning about human trafficking. What you will hear will not be easy to digest. But keep this in mind. While the issue is heavy, it need not be hopeless. Look around you at how many leaders are here in this community working on the issue. And think about what you could do as well. Today, you will learn what tremendous members of our community are doing to combat human trafficking, and you will learn what you can do to join them. We hope that you will join them. Let's review the day for a minute. Attorney General Olens is going to speak, then he's going to take some questions. So you be thinking if you have any questions that you'd like to ask him. Next, we'll have our first session of panels, as Jay mentioned, on the first floor. You'll have an opportunity to choose from a series of panels addressing the reality of human trafficking in Atlanta. Those panels will be victim rescue, victim aftercare, and the changing face of forced prostitution. Each will host a tremendous community of leaders. Then we'll break for lunch. Then you'll have another chance to choose from a set of 3 panels, this time more specifically addressing the legal side of the issue. You can choose from panels on criminal prosecution, criminal investigation, and legislative reform. Again, each panel is stacked with community members who are doing so much to combat this issue and would love for you to join them. So ask them how. Finally, we'll return to this auditorium for our closing plenary panel led by Cheryl DeLuca Johnson, who's CEO of Street Grace. I'm very excited for you to hear from her. After the closing panel, as Jay said, we'll have a reception just outside this building, and at that time, we'll have materials laid out from a number of the organizations represented today. Panelists will be there, and you can talk to them. You can take a pamphlet. You can sign the Georgia's Not Buying It pledge to combat the commercial exploitation of child slavery and sex trafficking. Again, thank you for being here today. It's my honor at this time to introduce Emory University Dean for the School of Law, Robert Shapiro.
Well, good morning. As evidenced by this conference and in so many other ways, we have truly extraordinary students at Emory Law School, and we're very grateful for all that they do. I'd like to thank and congratulate all of those who worked so hard to make this conference possible, especially Ashley O'Neill, the president of the Emory Public Interest Committee, and our conference co-chairs, Jay Billsborough and Catherine Davis. Now, we know that our outstanding students will continue to be outstanding leaders, and we're very grateful when these outstanding leaders take time to return here to share their insights with us, and that is the case with our keynote speaker today. At Emory Law School, we seek to promote the rule of law through the ideas we produce, the students we educate, and the service we perform. We emphasize that serving the public is the core mission of the legal profession, and that advancing the public interest should be central to the professional identity of every lawyer. Our keynote speaker is an extraordinary embodiment of these ideals. Following his graduation from Emory Law School, Sam Olens embarked on a remarkable career of public service. From 2002 to 2010, he served as chair of the Cobb County Board of Commissioners. He also served as chair of the Atlanta Regional Commission from 2004 to 2009, as well as finding time to serve on the board of several nonprofit organizations. On January 10, 2011, Sam Olens was sworn in as Georgia's 53rd Attorney General. In that office, he already has amassed an impressive list of important bipartisan accomplishments. His legislation to enhance open meeting laws and improve transparency in government was enacted by the Georgia General Assembly in 2012. The legislation passed the Georgia Senate unanimously. The vote in the House was 169 to 1. Of special relevance for this conference, fighting sex trafficking has been an important priority for Attorney General Olens. Among other initiatives, he was instrumental in advocating for the passage of HB 200, the state's new human trafficking law, which substantially strengthens the penalties for traffickers. Attorney General Olens is the recipient of numerous awards and honors, including the Tom Bradley Leadership Award by the National Association of Regional Councils, the Excellence in Public Service Award by the University of Georgia's Carl Vinson Institute, and the Living the Dream Award by the Cobb County NAACP. In 2011, the Cobb Chamber of Commerce honored Attorney General Olens for his dedication to community and philanthropic service by naming their annual award the Sam Olens Business Community Service Award. But that's not all. Most notably for us, next Friday night, as alumni of Emory Law School gather here from around the nation and around the world for their reunion weekend, Attorney General Olens will be returning to honor us by accepting the Distinguished Alumni Award from Emory Law School. It is with great pleasure and pride that we welcome back this most distinguished alumnus. Please join me in welcoming the Attorney General of the State of Georgia, Sam S. Olens.
Well, thank you, Dean. It's a pleasure to be here. I still don't deserve what's next week, but thank you. You know, before I start, there's a quote, and Kathleen had, of course, the great line, one of numerous great lines in MLK's talk. But the quote that I use all the time is from Winston Churchill, which is, "We make a living by what we get, we make a life by what we give." So it's all about the giving, not the getting. And in a room of law students where you have debt, and you will have more debt if you're not a 3L, often the first thing you're thinking about is getting a job that pays a lot of money to reduce the debt, getting the neat car, getting fancy clothes, eating fancy food, being a foodie. Let me suggest to you that many folks that go that way within about 3 years decide that's not what life's about, and they go towards a life in public interest, a life in public service, a life that's actually fulfilling. Because at the end of the day, you may not be able to give your children everything that they would like, nor that they deserve everything that they would like, as the father of a 21 and 23-year-old. It's really about making your community better. It's about making the world better. And as lawyers, we have a special responsibility in that regard. And if we literally live life to have the fancy cars, etc., then I would suggest you really haven't lived life. So now let's talk a little bit about why we're here today. So first, it's a pleasure to be back at Emory. It's a pleasure. I've gotten to know Dean Shapiro quite well over the years since I've become Attorney General. And let me warn some of you really bright, aspiring lawyers in the room, you can't run against me till you're licensed 7 years in our state. So I've got a little bit of a lead on you there, okay? So when I got elected in 2010, the week after my election was a national meeting of the National Association of Attorneys General, and 2 days before the regular meeting starts, they had the newbies show up, the folks who had recently been elected. And one of the panels was from a lady, Linda Smith, from Shared Hope. And part of what Shared Hope does is a scorecard on states with regard to sex trafficking. Now, never in the campaign did anyone ever ask me a question about sex trafficking. Now, Kathleen used the word human trafficking. I frankly used the word sex trafficking because it's sex. And I think similar to decades ago when people were too fearful of saying breast cancer, we need to actually admit what it is. So I personally use the word sex trafficking because it's not human trafficking unless you're also talking about labor in the full. What we're talking about in Atlanta really is sex trafficking. So I think it's appropriate to use the blunt word. If we make people uneasy, so be it. It's an uneasy topic. So Georgia was coupled with about 45 of our sister states that, I mean, we had a D or a D minus, whatever it was. The score was absurd. At the time I took office, minimum time in jail for sex trafficking was a year. That's not much of a statute. That's not much of a law. Now, I know the folks that put that in thought they really had to work hard because of the word prostitution. And one of the issues we have to deal with in this vein is differentiating what prostitution is, and we'll get to that a little bit later on. I want to commend the co-chairs. Clearly, it takes a lot of work to do this for Jameson and Catherine. let's talk a little bit more about Emory, and then we'll go back to the topic. As you can tell, I'm ADD. Hasn't hurt me so far. Okay. So I went to Emory, as Dean Shapiro stated. My number 2, Jeff Milstein, graduated a year after me. 3 of our 5 top division heads are graduates of this law school, one of which, Dennis Dunn, I understand, is a regular here at numerous programs. He heads our government section. We had 3 summer interns, 2 of which I saw earlier today, Nora Benvenidez, Stephanie Leventhal, and Amy Sobhani. We have 4 fall externs currently in our office: Joshua Combs, Edward Case, James Dolphin, and Anna Beaton. So now would be the time to start applying if you want for a spring externship or the summer internship. It's competitive. About 15% of the folks that apply get in. I sort of amuse myself with that because the pay is 0, very similar to my budget. And but the folks that we have working in the program really get to do neat stuff. I think Nora got to present a case in grand jury and assist. Other folks get to go have hearings, motions, etc. And it's a fun time. So I'd encourage you to consider it. What I can offer you is money. What I can offer you is a really good experience in an area of the law that you may be interested in. So let's go back to sex trafficking. So Atlanta's the city too busy to hate. Atlanta's, which is really pretty accurate. Every time my colleague from Alabama wants to tease me about Atlanta and water, I tell them that they'd be using a lot more if they weren't too busy with water cannons and hatred during the civil rights movement. The Birmingham airport was bigger than the Atlanta airport at that time. There's a direct correlation to tolerance and seeking to improve the world and economic development, and that still exists today. So in Atlanta, you're not judged by who you are, who your parents are, who your grandparents, which school you went to, which college you went to, which country club your parents belong to. You're judged by who you are. How else would you imagine the Attorney General having been from Florida and being elected statewide here? It's who you are. But we have this airport that's our #1 economic engine. We have a port in Savannah that's our #2 economic engine. We have a massive interstate system. And with those interstates and with that airport and with the port come a huge opportunity for sex trafficking. Now, on the West Coast, that is predominantly illegal immigrants. And some folks think that in Atlanta, it's predominantly illegal immigrants, Hispanic rather than Asian. Not true. Yes, we have sex trafficking involving illegal immigrants, but it's predominantly runaways. It's predominantly girls that are kidnapped without knowing it. It's predominantly kids that leave foster care. I was at a panel with Director Keenan. I don't know if Director Keenan's here yet. Great, great gentleman who's the director of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And one of the members of our panel Wednesday in Milwaukee was trafficked at the age of 14. She was a girl who probably looked more like 8 or 9 at that time. She had a very good girlfriend who had a boyfriend, and they were probably kissing, and that was about it. But she was very jealous that no boys were paying attention to her and had little self-worth. And her parents didn't pay much attention to her. And she went to a mall one day, and this young man, probably about 21, 22, sort of stared at her. She thought that he was looking behind her, clearly not looking at her. Ended up pointing towards her, and she ended up giving him her cell phone number. And at that point, a series of conversations ensued where he simply was very sweet to her. Then after several months, he was going to meet her at the mall and to pick her up. He took her about 20 minutes away to Atlantic City, New Jersey, put her in a room with an older girl The girl put a sleazy dress on her, gave her high heels, makeup, a box of condoms, and told her she was now working the streets that night. Never had kissed a boy before, but had sex with several men that night. Later that morning, when she wised off to a cop, not having a clue what was really happening to her, she was arrested and treated like she was a prostitute, because many law enforcement folks without training don't know how to distinguish between a prostitute and a victim. And then when her parents were called, her parents called her a whore. Once again, she's 14. So to the extent she didn't have a good rapport with her parents before, there was no rapport then, and within about a week, she was a runaway. Runaway girls become sex trafficking victims all too often. So she's now writing a book, and I know there are many men and many women who probably think she wanted it, that she was a prostitute. She just wanted out. And she was a victim. And one of the issues we learned first in this area is that traffickers are not pimps. When you're dealing with young girls, the word pimp is too nice. The girls, and we're generally talking 12, 14, 15, they're not prostitutes, they're victims. And the guys that are purchasing these young girls, they're not Johns, they're purchasers. And one of the big issues we need to teach is if you're a purchaser, you're going to spend an awful lot of time in jail too, just like the trafficker. And by the way, the studies show that the typical purchaser in Metro Atlanta is an upper middle class suburban white guy. Not at all what the public perceives in this space. Ernie Allen, president and CEO of the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, estimates every year about 100,000 children in this country are victims of sex trafficking. You can still talk to public defenders and district attorneys that say they don't run into this, and it's because they don't know what to look for. But I will tell you that the GBI gets calls all the time that we are arresting or indicting like every 2 weeks in the state. That we get calls from NCMEC, the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. There's the director might talk to you about a girl that they just recently saved in a Clayton County hotel from Wisconsin, where they get a tip. It happens all too often, and it is, as was stated earlier, modern slavery. Sally Yates, the excellent U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia, Metro Atlanta, had a case they prosecuted where the two girls were pretty much sold up to 20, 25 times a night for roughly $25. Young girls. Susan Coppich, you'll hear from later today, one of her prosecutors that's been involved in much of the space and has done a great job. So these girls are threatened with beating, starvation, confinement. One case that we learned about early on was a girl that was invited to a party, given the date rape, drug, raped numerous times that night, told that her dad worked, that they knew where her dad worked. We knew which office her dad worked in, what car the dad drove, the license plate, everything about the dad. Said about once a week we'll be taking you out and you will do everything we say, because the first time you tell your parents your dad will be killed. You go up to a 12-year-old girl and tell that to her, she gets out of the window of her bedroom once a night before she risks killing her dad. And several years later, when she was saved, the police thought enough of the gang that was doing this that the family moved across the country and still has not returned to the state they lived in because the threat was real. So people find it hard to believe, but in about 2005, the FBI told us that Metro Atlanta was one of the worst 14 cities in the country. Not something you want to be proud of. So what did we do about it? Well, we frankly got in gear, which is what Atlanta is known for. And the GBI started really taking a leadership area. And then in 2011, we passed House Bill 200 that Dean Shapiro talked about. We passed the bill in the House. We had to deal with a lot of those issues about prostitution. It was in the Senate, and an interesting arrest occurred. It occurred in Eastman, Georgia, rural Georgia, about 45 minutes south of Macon, Dodge County. A family had a $281 a month Dodge minivan payment. And they decided that in lieu of making the $281 a month minivan payment, they had a 14-year-old daughter. 14-year-old daughter provided sex, used for photographs every month in lieu of the minivan payment. 66-year-old car dealership manager thought it was a good deal. Mom got 8 years, dad got 10, used car lot dealer got 10. Wholly inappropriate. But it sent a message to the Senate that, once again, not only was it just illegal immigrants, not only was it runaways, not only was it kidnapped girls, it was parents selling their children for sex. Because that's sex trafficking too. It is anything and everything. So immediately, frankly, the faith-based community got in gear. Government's usually not first. The more I'm in office, the more I appreciate the faith-based community and nonprofits for what they do to lead us and to help us. And as was referenced earlier, you'll hear from Cheryl DeLuca Johnson, who heads Street Grace, a great nonprofit that's been very engaged in this space. Jennifer Swaim, who I've also worked with a lot in Youth Spark, you'll hear from, and they've been the two folks that I've worked with the closest in this regard. And they started pushing the issue, and no one was listening except maybe Renee Honorman, a state senator. And then Representative Ed Lindsay in the House started listening, and then between the two of them, it got juice. And later today, you'll hear from Representative Buzz Brockway, who's the new rep who's been very active in this area. So we went with a prior law where minimum was 1 year to minimum is 10 years. We went from a law that was 20 years max, involving a minor without volition, to 25 to 50 or life for sex trafficking of a minor. Up to a $100,000 fine, that's not the issue. Asset forfeiture is not the issue, but it provides it. Witness funds, that was helpful. Training by the GBI, very helpful, and we'll talk about that. But the main thing was putting folks away a long, long time. So just recently, Camilla Wright, who you'll hear from later today, an ADA in Fulton County, convicted a guy who just got life, the first time we know of an individual getting life. Dahlia Racine, an ADA in DeKalb County, got a guy 60 years. That guy was cocky enough to have training videos that he filmed in downtown Decatur. Think about that, training videos, teaching other folks how to be involved as a sex trafficker. More importantly, the law says that the age of the victim or your knowledge of the age of the victim is not a defense. You know the sign that's around here, you got a couple signs from my office. One is she looked 18, cannot be brought up in the courtroom. The age of the girl or the boy, sometimes they're boys, cannot be brought up in the courtroom at all. And there's now an affirmative defense for the victims. If anyone wants to think about convicting them as a prostitute, they get to present affirmative defense that they were a victim. Two very much needed items. So Georgia's now one of 7 states that has a B. No one has an A. And I would suggest to you we still need to make improvements to the sex trafficking in law in our state, and we're working on some suggestions in that regard to make it even better. We have 3 excellent U.S. attorneys in our state. I mentioned Sally Yates. We also have Michael Moore in the Macon area that goes south, and on the coast, Ed Tarver. Ed Tarver, about 3 months ago, indicted 24 folks. In Savannah, girls were as young as 14. It's everywhere, even though most people want to not acknowledge it. There was a case this spring, or winter, depending on how you look at it, about March, where a deputy sheriff from Greene County, once again, rural Georgia, stopped a car on a traffic stop. Girl in the back seat, guy driving. He had recently gone through the training by the GBI. Didn't smell right to him. They're taught signs to look for with these victims. And he called the GBI for backup. GBI came, separated the driver from the girl, ended up finding out the girl was 17 from Birmingham. Georgia was going to be her 4th or 5th state from the time she was 12. 5 years of this girl's life before she was potentially saved. And I say potentially because you got to immediately not treat the girl as a prostitute, but as a victim. And you have to immediately provide rehab. Mary Francis is here from Wellspring. We have a program, the Georgia Care Connection, where law enforcement is to call them no matter where they get the victim so that they can immediately get placed with folks that can help them. If you put these girls in a jail, you're going the wrong direction. You've got to rehabilitate them, and it takes an awful lot of massive acute care. A new bill just went into force July 1 that was referenced in an article in Augusta this week, where places such as bars, adult entertainment, bus stops, massage parlors must post a notice with a human trafficking hotline. You know, think of it, one of the interesting things about Atlanta is that unlike many states, you can go into an adult entertainment establishment, and there's no limitation, you know, the girls are totally nude. Unlike many states where it's not totally nude. So at the same time, for conventions, men know they can go to the establishments. Isn't that sending the wrong message when you're then dealing with sex trafficking? Totally inconsistent messages. So having the law on the books is nice, clearly more than nice. But as Sally Yates has stated, we cannot prosecute our way out of this problem. You've got to deal with demand. You have to have that discussion with men that they can't buy young girls. CSEC, commercial sexual exploitation of children. So we've partnered with the 3 U.S. attorneys, the GBI, the FBI, Youth Spark, Street Grace, the Governor's Office of Children and Families, anyone and everyone. And we started a program called Georgia's Not Buying It. If you could play the PSA for me.
It's more real than you know.
It's happening all around us, and Georgia is no exception.
The youngest, most trusting members of our state
are falling victim to sexual exploitation and trafficking.
It's time that criminals who purchase sex from children know that the secret is out.
And Georgia's not going to stand for it.
It just takes ordinary people being informed,
standing up,
and making a statement.
So when you tell me you didn't know,
we're not buying it.
Georgia's not buying it. For more information on how you can make a difference, go to GANotBuyingIt.org.
So now, as I mentioned, you also can just do notbuyingit.org or GANotBuyingIt.org. As you notice, the start of that video was Ernie Johnson Jr., otherwise known as Cheryl's husband. So we greatly thank Cheryl and her husband. And that was Harry Douglas from the Falcons, Devin Harris from the Hawks, and Tim Hudson from the Braves. Because it's important to have folks that the public knows when you want to handle such a campaign. And we need to thank all 4 of those men, well, really 3 of those men. Ernie didn't have a choice. We need to thank all 4 of those men because that's going out in a space where people aren't comfortable. If you go to Hartsfield-Jackson, that plays all the time on the TVs. The posters are there. If you go to transit stations, MARTA, Cobb, we're putting it in Gwinnett, Chatham, Muskogee, we're going around the state with transit putting it. Similar to the signs with the hotline for trafficking. You won't find my name on the PSA. You won't find my office's name on the PSA. It is very intentional. We knew this is a controversial topic from the onset, so we weren't going to give the media a reason not to play it. Make it as vanilla as you can, knowing it's not vanilla at that point. When Georgia had the Final Four earlier this year, in working with Street Grace and Youth Spark, Jennifer Swaim spent a lot of time with us, talking to the Central Atlanta Progress ambassadors, talking to the hoteliers, the volunteers for the Final Four, the taxi drivers, anyone and everyone to teach them about sex trafficking. When you see 5 young girls with short dresses and makeup and high heels walking into a single hotel room in an Atlanta hotel, that probably isn't the dad. And we needed to tell them, you call 911. You get the cops in there. The FBI was here in force with their task force, along with the GBI, Georgia State Patrol, all law enforcement, and they did their job. And it's having an effect, because it is getting around that if you're going to come to Atlanta, you got a better shot that you're going to get arrested. And it's also getting around that we have a statute where you'll spend a lot of time in jail. Shortly, you will probably hear in our state of some purchasers that get many, many more years in jail than they ever imagined, because there are some pending cases as we speak. So we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're doing anything and everything. You can help us. Challenges. What are the challenges? Well, you know, once again, before I was Attorney General, I had heard of Craigslist. I had never heard of Backpage.com. How many of you, raise your hands if you've heard of Backpage.com? I presume more if you've heard of Craigslist too? Okay. I'm not telling you that Craigslist is a sweetheart, but Backpage is far from ethical in our perspective. The attorneys general, 50 of us, have constantly demanded that they stop selling ads. Now, they don't say 14-year-old for sale. They say things like young and tender girl. But young and tender means under 18. Young and tender means way less than 18. And we estimate that they make $3 to $4 million a year on those ads. And because all we get are 3-page single-spaced legal letters telling us that we're not representing the First Amendment or supporting the First Amendment, we have not gotten anywhere with Backpage. So 50 of us recently asked Congress to amend the Communication Decency Act to revise it so that when you're doing ads for sex with minors, that we can arrest them, indict them. Not just the people with the ad, but Backpage, because that's the only way you're going to stop the ads. So what's our challenge other than dealing with folks on the internet? Our challenge are men. While there are young boys sold in this space, it's mainly young girls. So the challenge is telling those suburban, affluent men, not only is it totally inappropriate, but your tail's going to be in jail a long, long time. So you have the pledge that was referenced before. You have other efforts to reduce demand, and we're trying as hard as we can, but it can only be done with the nonprofits, with energized youth, with people that are willing to make this a cause. I'm looking at the time. I want to provide time for 1 or 2 questions. Now, I'm going to be here the whole day because these 2 individuals decided I'm also on the 3 o'clock panel. So feel free, I'll be around the whole day. If you see me at a table reading, you can still interrupt me. I'm used to it. Yes, ma'am. It's primarily male, but you can't make absolutes. A lot of it are talent scouts, model scouts. You see the pictures of the young kids, and you know they think someone's just told them they've got a beautiful face, a beautiful personality, and they're going to be a model. They're really going to be sold. And so we see a lot of it. When we were dealing with the Final Four, it was interesting because the folks at Central Atlanta Progress told us about some folks that happened to take a lot of pictures of young girls in Woodruff Park, and of some folks that were taking a lot of pictures of young girls at the Atlanta Fulton County Library. And they didn't think anything about it until we started talking about sex trafficking. But often you then go back to those girls and show them pictures and say, you know, I can make you a star. The problem is when they're in that room, it's not photos of them clothed that often is the issue. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. You know, candidly, we're very involved in that space, are the feds. The issue was about pornography and the efforts. Now, I'm involved in it in a sense you wouldn't expect. I represent the state. My criminal jurisdiction relates to the state in large part. There's some other white-collar areas, but it's predominantly the state. So we indict university professors that have pornography on their computers, more than you'd expect. We are involved in it more on the state level than in the private space. That would be the jurisdiction of the district attorneys. We actually have a case that's going to go up to the Supreme Court that will be interesting from a legal context. The guy erased the porn on his computer, but as you know, that really doesn't mean that it was erased. So the question is whether he still has adequate criminal intent when it's on his computer, even though he thought it was off his computer. And that's a case that's probably going to go up to the Georgia Supreme Court soon. So we're, you know, it's occurring, and when we see it, we take it on. Yes, sir. Okay, so while I did make a comment about the water cannons, etc., and that's accurate, let me tell you that Luther Strange is a great guy and we get along great. I'm going to the October 19 Alabama-Arkansas game with him and Melissa. And I would suggest to you that we have a really good rapport among all the Southern AGs, and we're very, very active in the space. And we have a lot of programs at our national AG meeting specifically in this space and how we can improve each state's statutes. In working with Reed Elsevier, there's now a national model ordinance that we are currently looking at to see what isn't in our state statute and what potentially should be added with regard to the next session. So while I teased Alabama with regard to economic development, and I think my comment was frankly factual, in that regard. Other than the fact that I never like taking pictures with Luther, because being 6'9" and 290, I lose way too many votes in that picture. I think he's frankly a great guy, and I love working with him. We've gone on numerous trips together, and I think he's really trying hard. Kevin Turner's his chief deputy. I was just with him in Milwaukee. Great, great guy. We spend a lot of time at our conferences specifically working on how to enhance existing state law. In fact, I'm trying to get him to actually do a program with me in November in Columbus, since many of them think they're in Alabama already, and for us to do a joint program there with Columbus and Phoenix City. So we do a lot of sharing of information. For instance, the big bill that we passed this session was on pill mills, and he's been very active in that space too. So we do a lot of coordination and a lot of collaboration, as we should. And it's frankly not a partisan issue, because when you're in the public safety realm, there is no R, there is no D. It's do what's right for your citizens. Okay. I see you standing. I'll be around later in the day for other questions. Thank you very much.
Thank the Attorney General one more time. Well, at this time, we'll dismiss and move downstairs to the first floor. Be thinking about which panel you'd like to attend. They'll be in classrooms C, D, and E.